What is up, everyone? Jagged here. Hope you guys are having a fantastic day. So just about 45 minutes ago, the Diablo Twitter tweeted out a new blog post that David Kim, the lead game designer for Diablo IV, just released regarding the system design in Diablo IV. And so for those of you who aren't super aware, David Kim and Blizzard team at Diablo are really trying to get the community feedback rolling this time around for Diablo 4. And so if you don't know, there's been a massive amounts of feedback on Reddit and on their main Diablo forums that they've been taking into consideration. They made a part 1 last week, basically just telling us that they are listening to our feedback. They talk about itemization, ancient items, endgame progression. Just basically, there's been an immense amount of feedback, and then they are really doing a great job communicating with us. So just today, they released a part 2 that is specific to itemization and game design. And I did briefly skim this, and I don't have a nice condensed summary for you guys, but I figured we would just maybe read it together. So let's just start. So system design in Diablo 4 part 2, and this is by David Kim, lead game designer. So they talked about in part 1. So in part 1, we addressed many of the open questions from the community about the Diablo 4 game designs we revealed at BlizzCon. I recommend checking that out if you haven't already. Itemization is a huge core part of any action ARPG, and we're focusing specifically on itemization in this blog because it's a complex and nuanced topic. Let's start with 2 key principles that guide us as the Diablo 4 development team. First, we agree that adding depth and customization to your character through itemization is incredibly valuable and important to the game. This has been the most discussed topic since we revealed Diablo 4. And to be clear, we believe Diablo 4 itemization should be deep and rewarding, and that's one of our highest priorities. Another important philosophy across the whole game for our team is the concept of easy to learn, difficult to master. And I mean, let's be real, in today's gaming world, there's a lot of streamlining that's occurring, and so a lot of us people who want to consider us more, I don't want to say hardcore, but just really enjoy difficult content. This is sometimes hard to grasp, but I mean, it makes sense. It allows people to get into the game, and as long as it's difficult to master, I think that'll appease most of us. So this core philosophy helped many of us become the hardcore gamers we are today, and one we want to embrace throughout the Diablo 4 development process. Second, we agree with the feedback that Diablo 4 shouldn't just mimic the itemization in our previous Diablo games. I mean, yeah, they're taking a load of inspiration from Diablo 2, and I think a lot of us want that. A lot of us would like a D2 remaster as well, but I think we do realize let's be real, we don't really want a copy. We would still like a D2 remaster maybe in the future, but we want a new game. They want a new game. They don't want to have an exact copy, and so they're just trying to take the best of both worlds there. So our plan is to take the best parts of the previous games and improve upon them while introducing new elements to make Diablo 4 unique. We don't want to create an exact copy of Diablo 2 or Diablo 3. It's worth calling out that on this subject, there was a lot of mixed feedback and differing opinions, and we acknowledge that means there's no single approach that everyone in the community will agree upon. That said, thanks to your feedback, we have some potential changes we're actively discussing internally regarding itemization that we'd like to share with you today. So again, this entire post is on itemization, and again, I will link the part 1. I will link the Diablo Reddit in the description, as well as the part 1 blog that they mentioned. So they are listening to feedback, and they have been having a ton of feedback, and so it's hard to sift through all that, so props to these guys. Again, we feel it's important to stress that this is a very, very early design, and we're sharing this with the community far sooner than we ever have before. There will be problems with these ideas we'll have to iterate through, and what's presented below is almost certainly not final. So obviously we're incredibly early in this process, so nothing is final here. The reason we're sharing this so early is because we want to involve the community in our process and learn as much as we can from your feedback as soon as possible. So let's get to it. All right, so affixes in Diablo 4. So we went through so much great community discussion, including a fair amount of conflicting feedback, and we've had dozens of hours of discussion on this topic. We were left with 2 major takeaways. First, item affixes should be a meaningful part of character power. I think most of us agree. We love affixes. I mean, it just adds another layer of complexity. I mean, that's what it does. And that's what we like. Second, they should create interesting choices when deciding which items to equip. Our previous focus was on making each affix geared towards specific build, so that the perfect item would vary depending on the build you were pursuing. We still like this overall direction, but we understand it can feel like your choices are limited because you end up chasing a list of best in slot items. And I agree. It's really interesting. Like in Diablo 2, like I have a pretty solidly geared barb. And I would like to think I have a lot of the best in slot items, but the realization is, depending on what class I'm facing, I have to switch that gear out. And that goes back to kind of the horizontal gearing versus vertical gearing. Horizontal meaning that we just have so many choices and they're all good and unique. So I do like that there's not really a best in slot. It just requires more thought, and it's just nice that there are other things that are better in different ways. So maybe whether or not they're just, just very situational. So, okay, here are the changes we are considering. We are increasing the total number of affixes on items, including magic blue, rare yellow, and legendary orange. This should raise the overall importance of non-legendary affixes on your character's overall level of power, and I like that. So we are also introducing 3 new stats. We have angelic power, which increases the duration of all beneficial effects like self buffs or healing. Okay. Excuse me. Demonic power, which increases the duration of all negative effects like debuffs or damages over time. Super cool. Okay. And ancestral power, which increases the chance of on-hit effects. So procs. Okay. So increases chance to proc things. Yeah. These new stats can appear as affixes, such as plus 15 angelic power, in addition to providing the above stated benefit. We want these new stats to also act as a prerequisite for empowering certain other affixes. If you don't have enough of a specific power, you can still equip the item, but you may not benefit from an affix linked to that power. So here are a couple of work in progress examples to better illustrate what these affixes do. Again, none of this is final and could change considerably. Okay, so we have Swift Furline Boots of Speed. So we have some general stats here, defense, and so we have plus 15 angelic power. So what I believe this is just plus 15 total to the character. There's no stats linked to that right here. However, down below, we see we have a +1 rank of devastation, which is kind of grayed out. And so it requires 50 demonic power, which I think we can take away from this is the character itself doesn't have that much power, and that's why it's red and gray. However, they do have the 25% cold resistance that it requires angelic power. So, okay, so obviously we have just the angelic power adding to the character, as well as the stats or attributes that require those. Fiery Amulet of Malice, so 15 crit, plus 2 ranks to Char to Ash, so it requires 60 demonic power, so we don't have that, and 25 fire res, we don't have 55. Okay. But we do have the 10% crushing blow chance proc because we have which requires 55 ancestral power. So, all right, that makes sense. That's kind of cool. Obviously, anything that's really new at us, it's hard to really, for the most part, it's hard to really develop too strong of an opinion on it. Because like right now, I'm like, yeah, that seems kind of cool. It's something different, but we don't really know how that will play out down the road. So right on, I'm excited for it. Each of these 3 powers will have a list of affixes that are attuned to it, so depending on which stats you care about, you might want to focus on angelic, demonic, or ancestral power. In the examples above, you would need 50 demonic power to get an additional rank in the devastation skill, 55 demonic power for 25% fire resistance, or 60 demonic power for an additional 2 ranks in the Char to Ash skill, which we saw up above there. If you wanted to build around Crushing Blow, you need to stack at least 55 ancestral power instead, while 40 angelic power would be required to gain 25% cold resistance. Okay. What I'm curious, just what popped in my mind right now, is I wonder if Crushing Blow itself has a set amount of ancestral power you need. So on every item, is Crushing Blow require 55, or does it vary depending on the percentage of Crushing Blow, I wonder? Okay. We think these changes will address those 2 main takeaways pretty well. Legendary powers should no longer completely dwarf the strength of your affixes, which I 100% agree. And the affixes themselves provide more interesting choices because their strength depends on how much of the relevant powers you've accumulated on the rest of your gear. You might find an amulet with the perfect stats for your build, but some of its affixes may require demonic power when you've previously focused on ancestral. Maybe your current amulet is the primary source of your ancestral power, so equipping a new amulet would mean potentially making sacrifices elsewhere. With this system, it will be easy to identify items with good stats, but it will take some thought and planning to decide whether the item is good for your build. The best items for your character will really depend on what you currently have and how you built that character, making it more difficult just to look up the right answer. And I like that. Again, having more options. I know that the best in slot is nice, but it's so nice having so many different options that'll help you in different scenarios. I think that is what really makes it fun. At the same time, we think the system keeps items approachable, even if you make suboptimal itemization decisions. You may be weaker, but doing so won't completely break your character. We can also introduce this mechanic gradually and naturally as you level, rather than making it a requirement to understand at the beginning. All right, attack and defense changes. So based on your feedback, we've changed attack to only be found on weapons, defense to being only on armor, and we've removed both attack and defense from jewelry entirely. The goal here is to better embrace the fantasy of each item type. Okay. So when I hear that at first, I don't know if I like it. Sometimes I feel like there are scenarios where it might be kind of cool to have and percent increased damage, or like for instance the fortitude armor on D2, like that adds, I believe that adds damage. Anyways, just something a little bit different. However, I'm certainly not against this at all though. We like the attack and defense stats as a way to convey power progression on items. A core part of any ARPG is the quest for more power. Hell yeah, dude. Just as we have skill ranks, talent trees, character levels, and so forth, attack and defense allows us to reflect the power growth in items as well. To be clear, attack and defense is not the end of the story of an item's power, but it does fulfill the easy-to-learn, difficult-to-master design philosophy by giving players a broad sense of whether the item is an upgrade. Players who are optimizing their character will still need to take the additional affixes on an item into account, as their benefit to your build can outweigh the raw attack or defense of an item. So solely picking your items based on attack and defense will almost never be optimal way to play, and that is awesome. That is good. That we don't want that much simplicity, but it does provide a good starting point for newer players. It's important to reiterate here that items are just one part of a character's overall power. Our goal is to spread out power across different sources, including skill ranks, your character's level, talent trees, items, and the endgame character progression system, which, like everything else, is still in development. So here we go, guys. Here was another, basically the tiers in Diablo IV were kind of controversial just because how many there were. Now I'm gonna pull up a quick picture just to reiterate of the items that were announced at BlizzCon. So, BlizzCon. Normal items, magic, rare, but then we have a legendary and set, which are on the equivalent tier. And then a lot of us and many just didn't really understand the point of some of these ancients. It's just, especially when every different color meant you had to replace your gear. And so I'm just so happy they're working on this itemization with us. But yeah, they are going to be removing ancient legendaries. I'm not sure about ancient sets, and if not, I'm not exactly sure why. But yeah, so let's read on. All right, in our last post, we mentioned that we were looking at some potential changes to ancient items based on your feedback. We're going to remove ancient legendaries from the game in their current form entirely. Our newest proposal hits a couple different feedback points, addressing the usefulness of rare items, as well as increasing the depth and complexity of player gear choices in the endgame. Yes, please. We'll be introducing a new type of consumable item, which we haven't yet named. This item would be earned by killing monsters, just like any other item. It would have one random legendary affix on it, drops only in the late endgame, and can be used to apply that affix to any non-legendary item. Wow. Excuse me. So a consumable item that will apply a legendary affix on anything that's non-legendary. I think I like that a lot, actually. Yeah, I'm all for that. Oh yeah. It just increases the power of, the items that aren't supposed to be the most powerful, and that's attractive to me. So this means a few things. We create an elective mode. So we create an elective mode for items. that is experienced after players have had time to experience rare and legendary items normally, as well as familiarize themselves with a variety of affixes. So I'm assuming this is referring to when you are playing the game, maybe your first playthrough. Let's see. Okay, only in late endgame. Okay, so I'm assuming this means is while you're playing the game normally, you're going to have your rares and legendaries and all your other tiers, and you'll be getting used to those affixes. And so once you are able to reach endgame, then you'll be familiar enough with those affixes that you might really want to put one of those on another item. And so this adds a way to introduce new methods of play without adding even more power to endgame items. And rare items with the best affixes on them are always useful and retain value. All right, more feedback, guys. So we want to remind you one last time, for good measure, that none of this is final. We haven't even tried most of this in a working build yet. We'd love to get some constructive feedback on these approaches, as well as general direction we're headed for itemization, and I think they're on a great path as of right now. We've never shared this level of detail this early before, but we look forward to reading what you have to say. Thanks, David Kim, lead system designer. So this is, I think, a big win for us, just because, again, all the feedback, guys, for all the aspects, and I know there's many of you who do really like Diablo 3, and that's great. There is many good things about it, but one of the things is when Diablo 3 is being created, I mean, it's swayed so far from D2, and that's not a bad thing, but the fact that we weren't able to provide any feedback of our own. So and so yeah, guys, there is part 2. Yeah, and guys, I hope you guys didn't mind me just kind of reading that to you. Obviously, I just found this out. I'm going to be streaming here shortly, and I just kind of wanted to go through it with you very briefly, give you guys a heads up, and of course, I'll leave the link to this, as well as part 1 and the Reddit, which there is just a ton of feedback. And so if you guys want to, provide your own feedback, feel free to post in that forum. So if there's anything you guys would like in D4, let me know down in the comments below. And again, guys, thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it, and have a great day. Peace.